Over and above the normal tree budget, right?
It's over and above the work, it's just a separate thing, so we're gonna have
It
to
ties
take to
into
the
the
membership
membership,
two motions, basically. One is basically an alteration of the course. Our articles say the course is set in 2007. Any alteration over $50,000, you have to do this.
Yes.
So we have to approve the alteration, and then we're gonna ask for basically $100,000 phase one. And phase one is removal of trees, stumping, sodding, and getting all that. And then when we approve the grounds budget next year, we'll add in a portion to start doing the planting, which is kind of the next part. But we really want to get going in the winter when there's nobody on the golf course.
Mm-hmm.
You guys can move in heavy equipment to cut down trees and stuff. It's just a little more efficient if we do it this winter.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So before I introduce Wade, one housekeeping item. Is anyone going to want food after the meeting? Okay, I'm going to go let our kitchen staff know that they can go home. There will be beer. If anybody needs a beer. Okay. So now for the introduction of Mr. Wade Horrocks. If I stand here and go through Wade's resume, we won't get through the presentation, but Wade's got a very deep, long history of golf course work all over Calgary and beyond. If you have any questions about that, you can either ask him or check him out on the Ground Cubed website. His resume is pretty well laid out there, and we're quite excited to have Wade on board to sort of lead us through this whole issue of trees that we've had here at the club, and I look forward to hearing some of the questions you may have for Wade and to see his presentation. I think this will be the third time I've seen it. So Wade, it's all yours. And I think what we're going to do is have Wade basically go through his whole presentation and then take questions at the end. Because if we ask questions throughout, what you'll find is a lot of the questions are answered in the slides he has here. All right, all yours.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. So this plan we've run through a few times. Ron and Dave have seen it, as well as Sean and Ken. But I was initially contacted by the club, obviously as a result of the state of the ailing spruce trees on the property. And from that visit, it became clear that any work that was to occur out on the golf course wasn't just simply an issue or a matter of removing those ailing white spruce trees. There had to be a larger kind of overarching plan for the golf course that included, removing those trees. What happens? What's the result of removing those trees? And really, what's the current state or status of the trees throughout the property? We're looking at the first fairway here, first tee, and this is pretty indicative of what you have at Canyon Meadows out here. And the course is, the majority of the planting out there, vegetation, is northwest poplar species, which line most of the fairways. And then inside that, I understand that a well-meaning club committee added a row of coniferous trees along the edges of the fairways, white spruce, you can see along there. Now, when you're planting trees, particularly when they're only about 1.5 meters or 2 meters high, it's very difficult to understand what kind of impact those trees are going to have when they're full-grown trees. I've made that my mistake myself, I must admit, and sometimes as a designer, we'll plant trees to have an immediate impact, knowing full well that those are going to be phased out at another time. Later on, you're just looking for that immediate impact. But this is a pretty a good example of what you see on the property. So you can see the spruce trees in there. They're diseased. They have to be removed. There's no ambiguity there. But it's also worth mentioning that the northwest poplar trees that you'll see out there, they're moving towards the end of their lifespan. A white poplar tree is typically 30 to 60 years in good conditions, which you have here. So a plan needs to be made to address that eventuality. Now, I must admit, I am not a a huge proponent of coniferous trees lining the edges of fairways. I think they have their place on a golf course. They're great visual buffers along the edge of a property. But the reason I don't like them is that I think they're excessively punitive if they're used in large numbers lining either side of the fairway. With a deciduous tree, at least you have the opportunity for a recovery shot. With coniferous trees, you have that low canopy that gets so close to the ground, and you know the difference between 1 meter to either side can be very, very punitive, right? Either basically you have a shot or you don't, right? So generally speaking, I like to see them kind of mixed in with the general vegetation throughout the golf course, but not as a rule lining either side of the fairway. So let's look at some specific examples. You recognize this hole, the 7th hole? A very, very challenging golf hole. I would say, in my mind, excessively difficult because it's simply too narrow out there. But I think it has the potential to be an outstanding, fair test of golf, a challenging but more interesting golf hole. So just looking at this image here, you can see you've got that coniferous tree on the right, which does a good job of kind of framing the hole on the right side. And then you can see the coniferous trees on the left and the impact they have blocking off that fairway bunker. Now, this is not the most egregious example of this on the golf course, but they do block visibility off into that bunker. So, and that is that's not preferred. So let's say you hit your drive out into the fairway. This is the look that you get when you're on the left side of that bunker. This is what the technical term for this situation is called a double hazard, where you're in the bunker and you don't have a direct line of play to the next green. That, to me, it's unfair and excessively punitive. I mean, it's not enough that you've got a approximately 200-yard approach shot into that green. Now you're asking the player to work the ball around the trees to get to the green. That's simply too much. When you're in the bunker, you should have the opportunity to hit a good recovery shot into the green. Okay, so you miss, instead of missing left, you miss right. This is an example here of just how punitive those coniferous tree plantings can be, particularly where they're planted quite densely, as is often the case out here at Canyon Meadows. You can see those trees are competing for all of those resources, water and fertilizer, to ensure a healthy stand of turf. And then you add to that the added pressures due to excessive shade conditions in there. But it's not just the turf conditions. As I mentioned earlier, now just a narrow miss off the edge of the fairway becomes extremely punitive. I had the opportunity to come out and watch some of the play during the Shaw Charity Classic, and one of the leaders in the early round, he misses the fairway by just a couple meters, and he's got a full shot penalty now where he has to chip out sideways. To me, that's excessively punitive. Now, you can't always ensure fairness, but I think you should take steps to try and provide it where possible. Now, instead, if this were coniferous trees, you might have the opportunity to hit a recovery shot and advance it toward the green. You may recall Sergio Garcia. This would be in the late 90s PGA Championship at Medina Golf Course just out Chicago. And he was chasing down Tiger Woods, who was at the height of his prowess back then. And he hit this miraculous recovery shot around the tree out of the rough and then ran up on the hill and did a little gallop up in the air. I mean, that was a fabulous shot where he had to really get creative. And situations like this were taking away those creative playmaking opportunities. So I wanted to show some examples of, in my mind, what are kind of the ideal parkland character golf courses, which I would consider Canyon Meadows to be part of. This is the Monster, Oakland Hills, just outside Detroit. But I want you to look at a few things here. One, look at the width of that playing corridor. Totally unimpeded views from the fairway bunkers into the greens. Trees set well back from the fairway. Here's a overhead view there. I mean, you can see the width of the playing corridors out here, but then look at your recovery shot opportunities. When you're standing on the tee, you see into the fairway bunkers, and from those fairway bunkers, you have the opportunity to advance the ball down the fairway towards the green or into the next landing area. I just love that look. To me, it's just so clean, so tidy, but still, when you're standing on the tee or looking down the hole, the trees still really define those playing corridors quite nicely. This is Olympia Fields Golf Course, another famous PGA Championship US Open venue just outside Chicago. What I really like about this image is it shows a nice tree-lined fairway, but look at the room that you have out here, and look what it does for creating strategic interest. Now all of a sudden you have all kinds of options off the tee. Maybe the aggressive player plays down the left side of the fairway to shorten the hole up a little bit. Maybe a player isn't feeling it that day or doesn't want to challenge those bunkers. They can play further out onto the right. But my point is that you have options when you're standing out there. It's not just get up there, hit it down the middle, that's the only option, or else face jail. Here's a look from that same fairway into the green here. And I just wanted to show you, when you're standing in the bunkers or near the bunkers, you've always got that clear line of play towards the green or down the fairway. There's an aerial view there. See, you know, very well defined playing corridors, but not too tight. The trees are spaced such that they can maintain a really nice stand of turf in there. You see all the recovery shot opportunities, if in the rough there as well. Last one, this is Winged Foot, and I wanted to show this just because there is just no visual clutter on that golf course. It's just an outstanding representation of a parkland course in my mind. But look at those nice views across the golf course. I think long distance views are something that are often underappreciated on a golf course, but it's really rare, particularly in the urban environment where you have the opportunity to have those nice long distance views, and that's one of the beauties of playing golf in my mind. So fabulous example here at Winged Foot. And here's an aerial view, and they have undertaken quite an aggressive tree removal program in the last number of years out here. It used to be that there were trees all along either side of the fairway, but those corridors were opened up for to enhance playability on the golf course, and also to open up some of those views and take it back to what the course originally looked like when it was first built in the early 1900s. Now I'm going to show you another famous example of a parkland golf course. Does it look familiar to any of you?
Jail.
11. Jail.
Gonna go really far out.
Yeah. So you can see, like, right off the bat, this feels much, much tighter, right? Not a lot of options there for strategic play. Basically, hit it down the middle or else. But even that is quite difficult. So let's say that you're a left-handed player and you play the ball right to left. The right-hand side of the fairway is essentially completely out of play. In fact, the trees actually block a portion of the right side of the fairway as it is. Same if you're a right-handed player that tends to turn the ball over. You know, you basically have to start it down the center of the fairway. So it's essentially taken away half of the fairway in what is already quite a narrow golf hole. Here's the overhead view of Canyon Meadows. So you can see, first off, the playing corridors, quite narrow. On average here, they're just over 50 meters, whereas typical playing corridors about 60 to 70 meters wide. Next, look at the density of the tree planting in here. I mean, it's just chock-a-block. You've got trees growing on top of the trees beside. It's dense, dense, dense. So, in response, this is the first blush at our tree removal plan out here, and you can see we've got a typical playing corridor here outlined in blue, and those red dots are trees that we would propose being removed, which comes to about close to 200 trees out here. And really, those trees are being removed just to open up sight lines into those bunkers and to provide recovery shot opportunities from the bunkers onto the green. That's how tight things are out there. I think one thing that is important to note too when looking at this plan is that with the exception of the areas between holes 6 and 7 and maybe 2, there's actually quite a lot of room out there. You know, you've got nice wide areas in between the fairways out here. So removing these trees and opening up some of these playing corridors is not going to create a safety concern with adjacent fairways, or in my opinion, the homes, and I'll speak to that in greater detail on another slide. Okay. Anyone recognize this hole? Hole 3.
Agreed.
Yeah. Yeah. So pretty narrow. You see that first fairway bunker on the right, but really when you're standing up here, you don't have a lot of options from the tee. You know, you're either kind of playing left of that bunker, or you can potentially carry that bunker a little bit, but really the preceding fairway bunker and that third fairway bunker is almost out of play unless you really work that ball from left to right. But wouldn't it be nicer if this hole were opened up and you would introduce those strategic opportunities back into the golf course? We're not talking a lot of trees around there, probably half a dozen trees, maybe 8 at the most. But you can see now all of a sudden you have options when you're standing on that tee. You can play left of the bunker, conservative shot out into the fairway. You can carry that bunker, or the very aggressive line you can hug as closely as possible as to that third bunker down the fairway. But to me, this is so much more of an interesting, strategically interesting golf hole where you now have options when you're standing on the tee. What's the wind doing that day? How do I feel? All different options come into play. And you can see by opening it up, we've still maintained the character of the golf hole and the DNA of that tree line character that is Canyon Meadows Golf Club. You recognize this one? Yeah. So as I mentioned, I was out here. I had the opportunity to watch some play during the Shaw, and the course plays as a par 4 during the tournament. But Chris DeMarco hits his drive, hugs close to the pond here. He's in position A, you would think. This is his look into the green. To me, that's not fair. If you hit the ball into position A, you should be rewarded with a good look into that green. Look at that. Just a removal of a handful of trees on the corner. All of a sudden, if you hit that perfect drive into that fairway, now you have a reasonable shot into that green. And I would suggest too that I think it was probably these trees were left to kind of enforce that par 5, or maybe enforce it as a 3-shot hole. But still, for the most part, I think that a lot of players, if they do hit it here, if the conditions are right, they're going to go for it. It might not be the safest option, but I don't think that those trees are going to have the intended result of preventing people all the time from going for that green. I just think that removing these trees too produces a far more strategically interesting golf hole. Now, for bonus points, what if we added some planting at the back? Now, the majority of that planting is on the north side of the 16th hole, between the golf hole and Anderson Road in there, with just a couple specimens in here, maybe 1, 2, 3, sprinkled in to provide a backdrop to that green, while still allowing you to have all of those ancillary buildings that are part of your Shaw Charity Classic. But to me, that just is so much more a nicer look into that green, and a fitting reward for hitting your tee shot into position A. So I talked about coniferous trees and my desire to kind of keep them on the perimeter of the property. So I'm going to just backtrack what I just said there. In some instances, they do provide a great buffer in tight areas, and there are a couple of those out on the golf course, not a lot, but one of them is between 10 fairway and 11 tee in here. So I would propose just a couple strategically placed coniferous trees in here as a safety buffer, but the intent of this image is to show the impact that those coniferous trees have on the turf in there. You can see what they do for access egress, where the carts are forced to come into this narrow area, and here the turf just doesn't stand a chance. You can see the roots sucking up all those resources. It's pretty darn near impossible to grow a quality stand of turf in that area. Want to recognize this one? 4T. So it's my first time playing Canyon Meadows. What's out there? I guess I'm just going to hit it straight. Are there any bunkers? Is there a task that's required from the tee? Do I have to favor one side of the fairway over the other? I understand that it's a private golf course and most people aren't playing this hole for the first time, but I think you get my point. I think that if there are hazards out in the fairway, for which there are, those hazards should be seen from the tee. How about that? Now you
Don't
can
you have
see
the same situation on the bunker on the right, trees beyond it again? Do they come out in second phase?
taking them out. Yeah. Now,
Right.
yeah, this is one
Yeah,
instance, and
that's
that's a good point, where you may not have the opportunity to reach the green directly, but you can certainly hit it into the second landing area from there. But look how this hole opens up. To me, this is just such a more visually interesting and appealing hole. I just love this line of bunkers that you've got in through here now, and that the hole kind of works its way around it. You've gone from this narrow bowling alley to now a zigzagging golf hole where you have all kinds of strategic options and different looks. I think one thing too, when you're out on the golf course and all of the holes tend to feature these narrow tree-lined corridors, is that there starts to be a feeling of sameness when you stand on every tee, where it's like, okay, what distinguishes this hole? It's just hit it down the middle with trees down either side. You've got all these great features here on the golf course in the bunkers. Celebrate them, expose them, use them, take advantage of them, highlight them. Here's a look from the second landing area with 2 trees gone. Oh, yeah. Open that right up in there.
I like that.
I'd like them all go.
I'd mentioned before when we did some of this work back in 2010 and 2011, one of the things that was in this, some of the stuff that you're talking about, taking a lot of those trees out on the right-hand side of that particular fairway on 4. There's a lot of trees coming out of it.
Very good. Very good. So, interesting note here. I'm sure that if you asked someone initially, that there would probably be some reluctance to removing trees here, maybe because of the proximity of the adjacent subdivision. But look at this hole and look where you're oriented in its current form. Where are we oriented here? Right in the bunker on the right side, right? Look at that. Now you can be oriented right towards the center of the green. You open up visibility to the green, show off those big flashy bunkers in there, and now you can see into that bunker on the right as well. But at the same time, you've maintained a significant vegetative border between the golf course and the adjacent property area to the south. Generally speaking, I am not a fan of having trees between fairways and bunkers, but standards are for standard golf courses. I'm going to go back on just what I said in this one example here. I think that this tree works well in this instance because I think it's part of the character of the hole. I think it's what distinguishes this hole from maybe the third hole or some of the other holes on the golf course. I say the third hole only because it's a hole of a similar length, dog leg right, that plays in a similar direction, but sometimes each hole is a unique example and should be considered accordingly. One other thing in favor of this tree too is that if you do hit it onto the left side of the fairway, you still have an opportunity to advance the ball towards the green. I think Ken and his team have done some creative limbing in there where that poplar is looking more like an elm tree with that high canopy in there, but it has the nice look of a specimen tree, and it really does distinguish the 6th hole as being unique. Hole 17 out here. I love this golf hole. I love the gentle right to left movement out there, but I think that it would be a little better with that tree out of there, in addition to some other trees along the right hand side. See this cluster in here? You kind of get into that jail situation in there a little bit, but I just love how you've opened that corridor up now and you've got that nice right to left movement. Look how those bunkers engage that green visually. To me, that's a really strong golf hole. This is what I would have in mind for hole number 7. A very similar feel where you're standing out on that tee, where it's a long, grueling, challenging but fair par 4 golf hole. Hole 18. Another tight bowling alley like tee shot out there. You can only barely see the edge of the bunker out here where you're standing on the tee. One thing I did want to note here as well is that generally speaking, I'm not in favor of shrubbery on golf courses due to the impact on playability. We talked about 17, it being a very strong, difficult golf hole. Okay, so you miss the green over here on the left, all of a sudden the ball rolls down into here, you've got an unplayable lie or potential unplayable lie. To me, that's very punitive. And I think it just kind of adds a bit of visual clutter out there as well. Same thing here on the right side of 1 green. It's between 1 green and 18 fairway. It doesn't really, in my mind, serve a purpose for player safety or anything of that nature. And I think, wouldn't it be cool if you're standing on 1 green, now all of a sudden you have the ability to look out over 18 fairway and back down toward the green. So further down the fairway on 18, say your shot finds the fairway bunker here. What are your recovery shot options? Well, basically you're going to play out into the fairway and it becomes a 3-shot hole. What if we open that up just like that? Who remembers the 2000 Canadian Open, Glen Abbey? Tiger Woods, 18th hole, 218-yard bunker shot, 6-iron into the green. One of the most memorable shots in Canadian Open history. Removing the trees in here, you prevent a similar scenario with maybe a little bit longer approach shot, but you get the point. But to me, this area in here is one of the most visually striking areas on the golf course. Why not celebrate it? Open it up. We talked about some of the views back down the hole from 1 green. Open it up. Get some of the views. Hole 16, immediately adjacent to Anderson. Now, I understand that in the time since this photo has been taken, that there's been some earthen berms here just outside of the property, which is great to hear. Trees are a great visual buffer, but they don't work nearly as well for noise attenuation. Berms are really, and those solid fences are the only objects that can really do that. But what if we were to add some planting in there? A much different feel in there. The majority of the trees are on the right side of that cart path, so they don't have a significant impact on playability or the ability to maintain a good stand of turf. But you can see just a couple specimen trees maybe on the inside of that cart path to kind of disconnect the cart path visually from the golf hole and frame that golf hole. Just like that. Hole 11, standing on the right side of the fairway in the first landing area in here. Now, I know that you've added a number of trees, and they're trying hard to work their way up and to provide a nice vegetative corridor along the edge of the property. But to me, visually, that fence really stands out along that horizon line. If we were to add some planting in there, just like that. You take that dead tree out beyond that fairway bunker out in here, but you can see over time that will really, those trees will come up and really provide a nice strong vegetative buffer all along the outside edge of that property around there. Here's a look over to 12, and to me, great golf courses, when you're playing them, it's kind of like being on a journey where as you move through the golf course, different areas of the golf course start to have a different feel. And to me, this is one of those areas at Canyon Meadows. I love when you come around the corner after the second landing area on 11, and you come up onto that green and the foreshadowing that you have over to the 12th hole. You know, this is just one of the unique areas of the golf course, and I really love that. I think it's one of the great features of your property. But I think it could be even enhanced a little bit just with some minor planting out here. Maybe some willows around that pond that really enclose that area along the outside edge adjacent to the property, with maybe just 1 or 2 trees, specimens in between 12 tee and 11 green, so you maintain some of those views, but at the same time define that playing corridor just a bit. Here's a look at hole 9. I want to show this because to me this is one of the best examples of the tree line character of the golf course, and a really strong relationship where the trees frame and define the playing corridor, but it's also fair at the same time. I love you've got that kind of specimen poplar on the left side with that bunker cut in just below there. It really just frames the hole so nicely. But at the same time, we've got one dead spruce out in here, and this pump house, which to me just detracts a little bit from that view down the 9th hole. Just some minor tree planting in there, some shorter species, so you maintain some of those views. But that's just an outstanding golf hole, a great example of, I think, what many of these golf holes will look like with some tree removal. 8th hole, I talked about kind of being a journey when you're on the golf course, and you kind of have these crescendo moments when you move through the property, and this is another one of those for me, much like 11, 12, where, you know, holes 8 and 9 have this wonderful connection to Fish Creek and that valley below. I would celebrate that and take a few of those trees out of there to really open up those views. Just keep a few specimens to frame and highlight the view, but I just love the look into that green now. And it's a different look than others out on the golf course, where when you remove that visual kind of background immediately adjacent to the green, that it adds some visual deception there, and it's a different look that I think would help to make this hole unique and stand out from its contemporaries. I love the kind of the infinity horizon, if you will, on that green, kind of like those pools where, you know, the views go way down the valley beyond the green. What it looks like from the green. Now, I understand that sometimes these presentations come off as being a bit negative and pessimistic, and I certainly don't want that to be the case. And I included this image in here just because I think that you have such a spectacular property here. It's really, to me, just about exposing and highlighting what you have on the property by simply removing a few of those additional trees out there. So this is what it looks like. This is what we would call phase one of the plan in here. So we've got trees to be added, and the majority of those trees are along that property boundary in here, going up adjacent to 12 and the second half of the 11th hole, with maybe just a few specimens thrown in here to further define the 15th hole. A couple in behind one green just to hide the maintenance facility. No offense, Ken. But really, this is not, I don't think, a real outlandish proposal in here. This would really, in my mind, is the absolute minimum amount of trees to remove to establish those views from the tees into those bunkers, into those hazards, and then from those hazards beyond into the green areas. Phase two in here, really what this says is that we would suggest, after you've gone in, taken the dead trees out, remove the trees for playability indicated in red. The next phase in our mind would be go back into these poplar areas in here and do a selective thinning, if you will, where we would take approximately 30% of those trees out. There's some thinning in there to ensure the best possible turf conditions of those areas, some for playability, and then also now that the trees are removed, you can start to think about some kind of succession planting. We talked about the age of the poplars and that how in the next 20 years some of them are going to be fading away into retirement. So at this point in here, we would start to look at back planting and augmenting some of those that planting that occurs along the edge of the fairway. But in my mind, lots of trees have to come out before more trees go back in. Now, I think that some of you are probably thinking about the potential for errant shots off the property with tree removal, and I wanted to show you what is a typical setback for golf courses as a designer. So in a scenario where you have a golf hole, and let's say you've got no vegetation and you have an adjacent residential area proposed alongside of the property, this is the offset that you'd have in here. Basically, it's 51 meters in here away from that line of play down the center of the fairway. You know, the original designer of your golf course, I think, had a lot of foresight in providing real adequate safety buffers. There is one exception where I think we should be conservative about removing trees in this regard, and that is on hole 8. But it's a real luxury for a residential golf course where people hit the ball as far as they do now for you to have those nice safety buffers. I have to tell you, too much of my job is going out to golf courses and trying to come up with solutions to prevent errant shots from leaving the property, where it usually means installing nets, and no one's happy about that. That's the conclusion of my presentation. I'd invite any questions that you might have.
Looks like we have more trees in the first 100 yards of our fairway than most of those pictures you showed.
You've got a lot of trees.
The whole hole.
You've got a lot of trees on your golf course property.
Wait, on phase 2, you said 30% removal.
Mm-hmm.
Is that like 1,200 trees?
No, I think if you were looking at, you know, if it was 30% of the whole property, you'd be looking at that number. But I would say, you know, in particular this area in here, where I think it's most imperative that you go in and do that kind of selective thinning. A lot of those trees are going to go in time anyway, so I think the club should be progressive in that regard and start looking at adding more trees in and beyond those trees.
So wait, the first part, you're talking about taking out 200 trees, and how many trees would we be planting along the edges?
I went back in, when we spoke earlier, I thought it was around 200 trees, but it's actually quite a bit less. It's about 120 trees.
So what kind of trees would you put in?
The key when adding trees to a golf course is diversity. So coniferous, deciduous, all different types of varieties. I mean, I would work with Ken and look at what trees have succeeded on the property in the past. There's no better example of that. I mean, poplars have a use. A lot of people don't like poplars because the roots are invasive, but they work really well on the outside peripheral areas of golf hole fairways or along the property boundaries. And the bottom line is, if you want to see a tree grow in our lifetime, poplars will do that.
Yeah.
So, but you know, ash, elm, willows, I think there's a tremendous opportunity for some willow planting, particularly up and around 11 and 12 area, and pine, spruce. I mean, it's a real shame to see what's happening to the white spruce trees out on the property, because historically speaking, the white spruce have been one of the best performers in Calgary. They're indigenous to Calgary, one of the few trees there, and their lifespan is typically up to 300 years old. But
Really?
just with a combination of environmental factors that we've seen over the last few years, they're
But
having
you
a
see them
tough
dead
time
all
of it.
over.
Pardon me?
They're not just here.
That's right, in
They're all
Calgary,
over,
in
yeah.
Calgary in general. Yeah, you're absolutely right. But diversity is key, so that if something comes along and attacks one particular species, that you've got others to back it up. Unfortunately, all tree species are going to have a weakness of some form. You know, Dutch elm disease comes to mind, you know, so diversity is key.
The way you had good examples of Waynesville and Oakmont.
Mhm.
In Oakmont, they took out hundreds of trees there. So-
Thousands.
Yeah. So, but one thing about all those courses, when you look at the parkland, is that their landing areas have a risk reward in all of them, whether, if you notice, it's right on either side of bunkers.
Yeah.
And we have that on a few of our holes, but some of the holes where we've taken trees out that are back shorter holes, and greatly so, 3, left side of 3, left side of 6. Would you think about, instead of trees, doing some bunkering, adding bunkering to frame some of the holes? Because some of the holes, I think, if you're, if, like the kids nowadays, with this, if there's no risk to getting into trees, they can take a driver out and they're going, they can drive 2, 3, 6, right?
Yeah.
10. So you almost want to have some risk for them to do that. And I'm just wondering how we do that.
In this plan, we, I think, have been careful to remove trees out of, as a response to the existing bunkering on the course. I think you've got an excellent point, and I would love to work with you adding bunkers to the golf course, but I think this plan here does really, it's a fair test. You know, I think that hole 3, we've maintained a lot of the existing vegetation, including that specimen tree, hole 6, to maintain that kind of tighter, narrower corridor and to distinguish it from 3, where that risk reward opportunity is available from the tee. But I think that's a question for down the road, where, yeah, maybe you start to look at more
I'm
bunkering.
just wondering, as you start taking trees out, you have more of a comprehensive view of a design plan that incorporates other options like bunkering or
It's in the back of my mind. I mean, one example would be the first hole.
like Oakmont and Wingfoot, they've got heaps of land, so they can stretch their course out to 7,400 yards, 7,500 yards, and the landing areas for the pros are still defined by bunkers, right? So we either hit a 3-wood hybrid to come short of the bunkers, or they would take risks with the driver and drive through that. We don't really have that option without putting trees down.
Yeah.
So
That's an excellent point. I think you do have the, go ahead, sorry.
I was just saying, how much is a bunker, an average size bunker, like on, the 3 bunkers on 3? How much would one of those bunkers cost to build?
Can vary a lot, but between 10 and 15,000 bucks typically per bunker. Yeah. I mean, you have
Not
room
excessive.
to add bunkers out there, but I would say that even this plan here doesn't go quite as far as some of those examples that I
Sure.
showed you with the
And
tree
they
removal.
have like good reason to do what they did too, because, you know, they got the US Open, so that they need people to move around and sight lines and all these other things, so.
I know you've added some back tees which have kept a lot of that bunkering in play, but in some areas I think the bunkering has become a little obsolete, like in particular one fairway in here where those bunkers are nice from a visual standpoint, but you know, it's not ideal. The person who finds that bunker there probably doesn't need that excessive penalty, but if that bunker were in here, now all of a sudden you've got strategic options from the tee. Do you carry the bunker? Do you play left of it? Do you play? But I think that's a topic maybe for another time.
Yeah, well, my point being is not where we had bunkers,
Mhm.
but just that we're looking at a whole plan to change the look, that we consider, you know, a more wholesome add to the course, right?
I'm a little bit like that too, because it's, to me, it's more of a visual thing. This place has got a lot more 15 handicappers than it's got scratch. You know, so the bunkers on the left on number 1 are a victory for a lot of people.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
not many people are flying.
yeah. And
I think a
to your
good golf
point,
course
most golf
play-
courses
plays
have more
well.
You have to
15
build it
than
for the
scratch.
membership as well, so.
Yeah. But these first 2 proposals you have, what's the dollar number on those, to remove those trees? Roughly.
Can I defer to the club to speak to that one? We've bantied some numbers about.
So, I think the proposal right now, Rick, would be in the fall is the $34,000 has been allocated to go with all the dead trees. And look at another 100,000 to take down the vast majority of what Wade's proposing in phase 1. Is that where we're at?
Sounds about right, yeah.
So
And
we're
that
looking at
includes stumping.
134. Well, we already have 34.
Right.
So
We
we're
took
looking at-
34 worth out already, didn't we?
34.
Yeah.
Or no.
Well, we're budgeting to do 34.
We've taken 15,000 without.
15,000 out, okay.
So we approved
49.
another 34 to stay under the $50,000 limit, right? Because we didn't want to cross that.
You're looking at 150.
So now we're asking for $100,000 for basically to remove
100,000
strategic
more or
trees.
100,000?
100,000 more.
100,000
Yeah, so
more.
160,000.
Just for phase 1 of this.
Yeah.
150 grand to get rid of those red tops.
Not all of
No,
them.
no.
The vast majority.
The majority.
Yes.
Vast majority. And 65 or 70 trees have already been removed, right?
Right.
This year, so.
So, all you need to do is get an audience, get the sign, get it done.
Yeah.
You pick the trees.
What's the feeling? Anyone object? I mean, any questions?
A lot of those trees are dead, but majority or
Not
some?
these ones, no.
Okay.
Some.
Some,
Maybe
No,
half.
no, sorry.
Maybe half. Less than
Yeah,
half.
that would be generous.
Yeah, less than half.
A lot of these trees are
Is that
strategic,
public,
they're not
for
dead.
the membership in general, yeah, most of them are dead?
I'd say less than half are dead, because we're getting rid of trees around bunkers and stuff, open things up so you can see and those
Yeah.
trees.
What it does with Wade is it illustrates just how quickly golf courses become overgrown. Like the left side bunker on number 7, over the years, we've probably taken 15 trees out of there.
Yeah, but you could probably take those trees out, nobody would know.
Well, the only ones they'll know are those ones on 18, if you want to take out, open up that whole pond
Yeah.
area.
Yeah.
People are gonna know those are gone.
Yeah.
For the rest of
15.
it, I don't think they'll notice.
yeah.
18 they'll notice, because those trees are there, right? You see those trees, but I can see what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
You give it the views from coming back off 14, you got the views coming off 1, if you get rid of that shrubbery, which is where my ball goes, so then you get rid of that shrubbery, and then you get much bigger views of that whole water area.
And when we did.
But those
the-
trees there are they'll know they're gone.
Yeah, when we did the renovation back in '7, we specifically left those trees
Yeah.
to try and keep people to the right, because if anybody ever goes down that hill in a
Yeah.
golf cart, they're dead.
Yeah.
It's a 2-to-1 slope down to a 20
So
foot.
those are the only trees that I can see people saying, oh, I wouldn't have these. The ones on 4 where you're opening up that bunker, they're gonna be happy.
You know, my experience is that most people feel that way, that they're not exactly sure what's changed.
But something's
Feels
changed.
more open, something a little bit. Did you get a haircut?
Yeah.
Looking better.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We had a
exactly.
tree out here, didn't we? Right out here that blocked the view of the course, in a wedding, if you wanted to have a.
Lightning hit that sucker.
It did.
Nobody even noticed.
You guys know we have winter lightning
God,
here?
I just forgot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But those are the only ones that are 18 that I can think
But
of, say something.
we will
But I
have,
see what you're
we will
concept.
have, when this is presented to the general membership, somebody will come up and ask, you're planting all of those trees, and all of these trees that we planted on 11 and other have died, so why are we planting more trees? Are they just gonna die? So, I'm not, I'm just being devil's advocate here, because
Good question.
I think the plan is awesome, but I think people will ask that question, and it might come up that, do we water them enough? Can we water them? Do we need to? One of the things for water sustainability is, I think it's, you can, I'm not sure, it doesn't matter. A full-grown poplar would use about 300 gallons of water per day. So if we take out 200 trees in the course, how much water are we saving by doing that? And if we plant them on the perimeter, do we have to water them as much, or will they, can we save water that way too? So it could be a double win here for the golf course, because those trees aren't gonna matter as much, like, really.
It'll be easier to cut grass when we remove, right? Like,
Yeah,
if you get rid of the trees, you'll have better.
It's more than
There's
just
a-
sightlines here, is what I'm
Yeah,
trying to
that's-
get to, I guess.
And as
And
phase two,
plant-
if phase 2 is determined to be increased planting versus poplar removals, I mean, you start to make a case for, you know, a serious haircut, like Wade's talking 35, 40, whatever percent of the poplar trees, but if you just take all the subjectivity out of it and look at just sort of the facts in terms of increased mowing efficiency, a whole lot less damage to mowers as they're bouncing around the trees, arguably very improved playability, especially in the fall season when we're battling leaves. Protecting the golf features like bunkers with tree roots in, greens sometimes, tees arguably, fairways, we have roots from 13 right out in the middle of the fairway. Protection of hard landscaping features, cart paths, our cart paths over the front nine in very poor condition, predominantly due to the poplars on them. City of Glen, we were talking about this last time, City of Calgary's, they're now 30 meters between a poplar tree and any hard landscaping feature. So those kinds of, I have a whole list of these things. Improved turf conditions. If you look at the improvement in number 10, down by the green, since we took out all those trees, everything just exploded. And you could talk about it in a meeting like this, but that's just one of the best visuals for the people who you know, play the hole with their eyes open week in, week out, look around and go, gee, something's good's happened here. Yeah.
Huge difference.
Sunlight, like it just, the list goes on. I don't have my glasses, but what's the rest of them? Where? Wade showed that really excellent slide of where the carts and mowers and everything just worn it down to dirt between the trees. Hard landscaping features. The amount of time we spend mulching leaves here for about 5 weeks in the fall. It's probably 3 mowers, 6 to 7 hours a day. That adds up to a lot. The damage we do to those mowers bouncing through the tree roots. I'm sorry, I'm taking over the meeting. I didn't mean to, but there's probably 15 to 18 very compelling reasons why you'd want to have half the poplar trees uprooted. I won't even go into things like playability. Like for some of us, storm damage. We spend $50,000 a year, or we have until this year, taking all the storm damage out and pruning these poplar trees. If you have half of them, you can use those money. Bunkers that are just full of leaves. Sorry, it's not. I've never had. Best line I think I can share is I've never had an architect, an arborist, a tour official, anybody come out to this golf course and say, "Ken, you guys need more trees." Just have not heard that. Sorry?
I don't mean to sound flippant or callous, but what's happening out here is doing your golf course a favor. That's a message from the golf gods saying, take trees out.
We haven't heard that from our members. We haven't had, has anybody had fielded any complaints about,
No.
that should tell us something, shouldn't it?
Not a comment.
No,
Most
the
of
other,
them
actually the other
Yeah,
way.
yeah. I
Having
can
said-
breathe.
Wow.
Yeah.
How many trees
That's
did you
not
take
10.
up in 2004 when you did the renovation?
Well, it was in two, actually, 600?
600
Yeah.
trees? Yeah. So like every
So it's not
periodic
like,
period, you
yeah,
gotta.
you know, if the perception out there is that we've been dragging our feet in terms of, trying to stay ahead of the curve on this one, I don't think that would be a fair criticism.
Does some disappear every year?
Yes, yeah. Now, at times there's, as boards and committees ebb and flow, there's a little more pushback, so you rein things in a little bit, but.
So Wade, how would you answer the like, obviously we're gonna get more questions on this, and, I think, from the 2% at the club that, feel like we're making the golf course easier.
Yeah, I can't dispute that we're making it easier by opening the playing corridors, but are we making it too easy? Absolutely not. I mean, you look at the example of hole number 7, and you're taking what I believe is a excessively punitive and borderline unfair golf hole and making it a fair, stern, solid test. It wasn't my intent necessarily to make the golf course easier through this operation. It was to make it more interesting, more fun to play.
I'm actually not even thinking of easier. I'm thinking like I use 3 and 6 as an example. Like you hit it through the fairway. There's nothing because we have no mounding out here. That's the other thing that's unique about Oakmont and Winford. They're significant mounding off the fairway. So the fairways are defined not only by bunkers, but they have mounding to keep the ball in play, if you will. So
Our golf course is just too hard. I agree. If you don't think so, go play a tee back from where you play. I don't care where you play. You
No,
play
that's-
gold, you go back to
yeah.
white, go back to blue, go back to black. Our club sees the champion for the club sees was 75, 75, 74. Hello, we've had one club champion that was under par, ever. So you're telling me that it's gonna get that much easier? Like, these are the types of
No,
things,
I'm not.
our golf
Well,
course is hard.
I'd say so.
It's
It is.
and so back to the 1% or 2%, whatever it is, this doesn't change anything.
Yeah, I don't think so.
No.
Nothing for them.
No.
This changes the golf course for our population. which
Yeah, I
is
think
in that-
when you're doing a design,
in-
you're making a
in
change, you need to
12 to
think of your
25
membership.
handicap, all of a sudden, the game is more fun. And ultimately, like, that's what we're all striving to do.
well,
Right.
all the trees you showed in your example, none of the low handicappers even worried about those.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
right, I'm just thinking about, just like safety for one, so you're not just standing up there in the driver with
It's blasted, yeah.
Blasted, so, but also just like visually defining the fairways, on the shorter holes in particular.
That whole side, that's too down.
Yeah, we have to go through you have to go through the process, getting rid of the trees, and then planting other trees in other places. And before you can decide what that third phase is, and if that is adding some traps and things to the course, to make that a little more difficult if need be. But we need to get through 1
Yes,
today,
yes,
and then we need to move on to 2.
yes.
So
Yeah, and then maybe there's a 3.
that's the way it plays out for me.
Agreed.
These phases will never end.
No.
No, because there's still a lot of trees growing out there.
Something.
It's not static.
No, there's a change.
So maybe we can get some money from Justin for these billion trees.
Yeah, we're taking them out.
Oh,
We're gonna have to
phase
pay.
2.
Well, just
Well, why have to be
don't
covered?
tell me that.
Well, picketers at the gate, protesters.
Carbon credit.
Take it, trees.
So do we have consensus then, like, I'm just speaking to the grounds committee now, that So Steve, Jim, Ron, you guys?
I love it.
Absolutely.
I love it.
Okay, so
I'm
I'm gonna
not on the
make,
grounds committee, but I'm in.
I love
I'm gonna
it.
make a formal motion then that we, come out of grounds, we take a motion to the board of directors, to approve phase one, which is a additional $100,000, to proceed with this, and we'll have to have a special meeting to do that, but to get into that.
We want to try to approve phase one and two at the same time, or is that too complicated to run?
Let's just do phase one right now, 100,000, and then we can deal, some of phase two,
It's a
we
lot
can deal with the
easier
budget.
to
I
sell
think-
100 than it
I-
is.
So,
I don't know, I would argue that one.
you gotta do them together.
I would, because people are gonna say, hey, this is $200,000, $300,000 project, and you're only coming at 100 and 100 and 100, like, what is the total project?
Well, 100,000 we want approved, because we want to get going now.
Yeah.
The second part will be in the budget that we'll be showing in the AGM. Any planting that happens next year, we can do in the 2020 budget. And we can put in a specific, 75,000 or 100, whatever you guys come up with the number. You guys got kind of a couple months to figure it out. We'll put it in the grounds budget.
Are you
Sounds
still
like
not
sounds like you
linking
got three
them?
projects.
You're still linking them together.
They're linked, yeah.
Even if you do them in alternate years? So I think you have to have.
Well, we have to have a number.
100,000 to be approved for this year, total project estimated cost of X.
Yeah, well, that's $200 if your assessment. If you have an assessment for phase one, that's $200 remember.
We're not assessing, are
But
we?
I don't
No,
think we have
I'm not saying that. If you
Okay.
did, that's what it would be. So all in, you're the same as the 425,000 roughly, 425 assessment we had last year. So I don't see a problem going to them with the phase one and getting that done. And let's see where the rest of the finances go and where the other projects that we have on hold. The wing wall, and all the rest of that stuff.
But are you gonna show the members all three phases, or are you just gonna show them phase one?
No, I think we should show it all to them.
I agree.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Show it all
Show
and
everything.
get funding for
Let's,
phase one.
let's do what
I'm
we,
good with that.
let's do what
I'm
we
good
need
with
to
that.
do right now.
I'm good with that. Show the
And-
whole thing,
and
get the
move
funding
on
for phase one.
as we need it.
I'm good with that.
Right?
When phase one's done, phase two may change, right?
It could.
When we open it up, we may go, we want to do a few more trees or
And he
more
may
planting.
come back and say,
bumpers.
look,
Yeah.
this may not work, let's
Right.
do this.
Yeah.
So,
I think you gotta show all three phases,
Yeah.
get the funding for one, and go.
yeah,
I agree.
absolutely.
I agree.
Okay, so I'll make the motion for $100,000. Seconder, Jim, okay, all in favor?
Yep.
Okay, so that was the business part now.
Great.
Yeah.
So we're gonna take the presentation, we'll
You may
email it
wonder
to the
why.
rest of the directors,
Yeah.
and see if any of them are on side, and then,
When this is going to the general membership, I'd suggest you put that in on the website as well. Like, it's pretty powerful,
Oh, it's
presentation, looking at the other
Yeah.
courses, looking at different tee boxes.
Take the trees out of
It's,
there. You almost don't
it's-
know it.
it's
That's why-
such a
that's why we
compelling
brought
argument, you
Wade in.
can't say no to it.
Yeah, that's why he's here, like, for sure.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree
But
more.
it comes,
Yeah.
it comes across well in that presentation.
Absolutely.
Half an hour.
Yeah.
That's good. Well done.
Yeah.
Good call.
yeah.
Okay, are there more questions for Wade?
One comment, we took trees out on between the first green and the second tee box. And they were kind of terrible trees for playability standpoint anyhow, but there's a safety issue there now, like a lot of guys can reach that green in two quite easily, but left is a miss, and it's on the fly on the second tee box. I don't know what you do there, but just a comment. But you made it, that observation between 10 and 11 tee box, which I've observed because we hit the driver from the, you hit the 10 tee box, so the guys can't.
I think, blocking those shots off, where they're coming in from the landing area, but at the same time allowing a free flow of access egress between
Yeah.
one green and two T is ideal. So I think kind of getting in the minutia of the plan at that point, but.
No, I know,
so-
just a comment that
Yeah.
I had a couple people say that they had a close call there.
Point taken. Thank
Put it
you.
on a second.
Is, right now, the way we're headed is phase two would be more leaning towards planting than poplar removal, is that sort of the sense?
That was my understanding. Phase two is planting, three is the poplar.
So we don't get our same bang for the buck of the poplars, because pay their everything, you know what, and we can't get rid of the wood.
Oh, yeah.
Double, probably closer to triple the cost for removals and disposal,
Really?
right? Yeah, we get rid of the species, they go off to spray like sawmills, we actually bill a very small amount of money for it, but often we just can't get rid of it.
Firewood.
Yes, yeah.
Could you, the city, when they took out a lot of this,
We just left it there. Yeah.
they had access to it, and it was on their website. You could go there and take ground poplar and any wood chips. They had wood chips and they had firewood. They're not cut to the quarter.
Nope.
They were just, you could go and take a stump if you want. Is there something that we could do to the surrounding community if they want free poplar for fire?
Yeah, there are options available to us,
That's
but
right.
it's just that,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a lot of wood and.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, any other questions for Wade?
No?
No.
No.
Thanks, Wade.
All right,
Thank you,
thanks so
sir.
much, Wade.